Well, hello, everybody. It's Mike from Profiling Evil. Wow, what a day, huh? This is really interesting news. I want to jump right in. I'm still out here in Dallas for the International Chiefs of Police Conference. I've been in meetings all day, came back. I actually was on with Annie Elise on text back and forth today because we were talking early this morning about let's do something on the Stockton serial killer. And lo and behold, at 2 a.m., law enforcement made an arrest. And in their opinion, they have confirmed that they have a suspect in place. So let me just while we let people kind of pile in here, because I think tonight we might have a few people. Uh, let's just say hi to a few folks. Alice, Alicia B, thanks for jumping on. It's great to see you. Keep It Real's on. Vampifier is on. Sinking Swimmer, Bug Love. Yeah, it's great to see you all. Thanks. There's some really nice notes in here. Amy or Amma Sleuth, Don Marie. Great to see your name popping up here. Diane Phoenix, it's good to see you, Diane. Thank you so much for being here as well. And we'll get rolling on this thing. I want you to ask questions as we go along. We're going to just chat a little. I don't know how many of you have caught the last couple of episodes that I've done on this serial killer, where I've mapped out the locations. I think you're going to be interested tonight as we look at some additional information that I've found that I hope will be interesting. So we'll get along and look at that as well. Somebody told me the other day I ramble too much. Sorry. I'm just trying to do my best. So Jersey Girl, great to have you. Hope you'll subscribe. It looks like you came over from Annie Elise. And yeah, folks, please hit the like and subscribe and all that stuff. In fact, I'm gonna quote Don Marie right here. Please make sure you're doing that and jump in. Eva Letts. I'm sorry, I left my glasses. I've been kind of discombobulated. There's 15,000 to 20,000 police chiefs in Dallas right now attending meetings, and just got back from the hotel. I've been kind of typing things while I'm sitting in meetings and everything else. And there was a question that just popped up. Kira. So is there a Chicago connection? I'm grateful to say, because I kind of went out on a limb. I didn't think there was one in the beginning. I still don't think there's one. And maybe you'll agree with me when you see some of the things that I cover here. So let's get rolling. Let's cover a few things and then maybe answer some questions. I also want to play the press conference and talk a little bit about what was not said there. And, I'm kind of always saying it's not so important what is being said, but what isn't being said. And please, I hope, folks, that you will keep me on track if I'm missing an important question along the line or something like that. But here's the deal. This guy who was suspected of killing 6 people, 6 men, and wounding a 7th was arrested last night in the middle of the night. The police actually had some tips and some things that caused them to actually stake out an individual. They were following that person around in his vehicle. And by the way, I've looked at all of his ownership records. The suspect in this case, whose name is Wesley Brownlee, 43-year-old African-American man, and has a professional background, which is always kind of interesting because there's a common theme in serial killer cases that I can't wait to hear coming out in the news. When the press goes over and puts a microphone in the face of the next door neighbor to this predator, alleged predator, I'm going to say right now, people will say, I don't believe it. Nicest guy in the world. If I was sick, he would cook me chicken soup. needed a jump on my car, he was always the guy that was willing to help out. And this is kind of the way we hear these cases so many times. And this guy, in fact, let's just talk a little bit about Brownlee, just from information that I've been able to pull offline. Again, a 43-year-old guy. This guy works in the health systems industry, and if the records that I found are correct, he's a vice president in administration, which means he's held a pretty darn responsible job in the daytime, which is probably why he had to go out and hunt at night time, because he was showing up to work. And so Terry just asked a question: did they catch him, or is it just a suspect? No, they've got someone in custody. They will charge him on Tuesday with 6 counts of homicide. I suspect they are going to pile a ton of additional crimes on top of him, on top of that. And we'll see more as this thing unfolds. Hey, folks, thanks so much for jumping on. We're talking about the serial killer case in Stockton. I think you all know that. And I hope you're hitting the like and subscribe button and all of that stuff, so that we get lots of nice kudos from YouTube. And if you feel inclined and you want to do a super chat or anything like that, it's always appreciated. It's kind of a weird thing, because I don't do many lives, and because of that, I oftentimes maybe don't earn some additional revenue. And whether you like it or not, it costs money to keep these YouTube channels going. I can't believe the amount when you're paying $40 a month for StreamYard, like we're on, and other kinds of things. It just isn't cheap. And frankly, that's why I'm glad I still have my day job and my law enforcement retirement, which makes that nice. But I personally am not going to say where he works, although I have that information here. I think I'm going to let that come out through normal sources. So I saw the question in there of where he works. The parent company where he works is located in Los Angeles. And I think, just because, I'll tell you what, I'd sure be frustrated if my coworker was a serial killer and my business took a hit because I didn't know that I'd hired an alleged serial killer. So, oh, wow. Thanks so much, Deanna B. That is really kind of you. And right behind you, Red Rock. Thank you. You're very kind, and it's really appreciated. Lorna, it looks like we have a new member. So let's see here. Get a bottle of honey and some cayenne pepper. Yeah, you know what? I don't know what's going on here in Dallas, but I got something going on. So hopefully I won't bug anyone. My team is out to dinner tonight, and nobody wanted to be near me because they thought maybe I was coming down with a cold, and I hope it's not that and something else. But Mary D, thank you so much for that kind super sticker. That's really awesome and appreciated. So anyway, if you didn't catch some of the stuff I've been doing with mapping, we're going to talk about that a little bit as well. But here's the deal. Wesley Brownlee, 43. Now, the DA came out and was, really pounding her chest and letting everybody know how mad she is about everything. And she said she's never going to mention his name again. She's only going to call him the defendant. And that's all fine and well, but we need to know who it is. And we're not going to memorialize him or anything else like that. But he's a 43-year-old guy. And here's something that I suggested. And again, I don't want to say any of this to sound like I'm saying I told you so, but I suggested then that I believed he lived in Stockton. And if you remember, I even suggested that I believed he lived in Stockton when his first homicide occurred, and that as he worked up the courage to commit that first homicide, he drove to Oakland just to give himself some separation and make sure that he had a little safer chance of getting away with this. Diana, thank you so much for that super sticker. Really appreciate it. From Stockton, and I actually went back and found all of his places that he lived in the last 20 years. And we're going to talk about those because it's kind of interesting. Hey, thanks. Welcome aboard, Pam, new member. And Eva, thank you. And by the way, Eve, I left my glasses in my backpack. So please forgive me, but thank you so much. And let's look a little more at some of this. But again, I felt really strongly, based on the way he was committing these homicides, that he knew the area and knew it very well and intimately. Now, we wondered that when we saw the video of him walking through the apartment complex, the amount of confidence that he appeared to have. And so that was interesting. The thing that I found really interesting was the way in which he was selecting victims. If you remember the map I created, it was down to a 2.3 square mile radius that he committed those 5 homicides in, when he really ramped up in July. When police arrested him at 2:00 this morning, he was dressed in black. He had a mask around his neck. So and the chief said something really impressive, and we'll play it during the press conference, is the chief said he was out hunting. He had a weapon with him, and police are confident that they stopped a homicide last night. And this is really important too, because if you were watching when I was on Web Sleuths a couple of nights ago, I was going through the map and talking about the predator and the way in which he was escalating, the short amount of time between each murder. And that as the intensity started in not only the community, but the press, social media, the true crime community, all of a sudden he went quiet. And it was 3 weeks that he didn't commit a homicide. And I said on the show, he's either really itching and needing to get back out and do this, or he's bugged out and figured out it's not a safe time to be hanging out in the area and doing that. And I think we saw that he was fixing to do something else. So I love some gumbo. No shrimp, but tons of sausage, please. That would be awesome, Southern Sass. Thanks. And Debbie, I'm going to put this up just because it's so self-gratifying. Please, folks, hit the like button, and let's see what we can do to grow this thing. But to recap, they have arrested a man, and his name is Wesley Brownlee, 43 years old. He's a professional in the health industry. I'm going to leave it at that and let somebody else maybe rat out who he works for. He was carrying a weapon with him at the time, was wearing the same clothing that we've seen in his normal way of doing things. And the police department announced that they have him in custody. Now, what I want to do is I want to just take a minute and go through the map that I created again. And I'm going to just look here. Are you guys okay if I go and pull up the map and talk about a couple of things before I play the press conference, or would you rather have the press conference first? I'm going to watch and see. There's a nice comment. Please, folks, consider joining the Profiling Evil Academy if you're thinking about doing that. It's a lot of fun in there, and we try to push some good content out. So let's see, map time. let's do the map then, and go in. So here's what I wanted to point out. This is really interesting, is if we were to go in here and look at this map and explore a couple of things, I want to go through the order in which this predator was taking out his victims. So I'm going to just grab a little scratch pad here and put a little red color on. So if you remember now, victim number one was in Oakland, 6 days after Oakland. And I think I explained it pretty good, but I'm going to say it again. I believed from the beginning that this predator, if it truly was his first victim, that he was experimenting and he was ensuring his success by driving to Oakland, separating himself quite a bit from the event. But by doing that, he separated himself from the emotion in the community and the fear that these guys want to instill on a community. He wasn't able to hear people on the street talking about how fearful they are, and he wasn't able to hear localized news, even though it was only 60 miles away. 6 days later, though, he builds this hunger up again, and he shoots Natasha Latour 10 times. And if you remember, she was down at the train station, and we talked about, I brought in a bunch of different things, but I'm going to just point this out first. So after Natasha, though, his next victim was right here, and I'm going to just kind of zoom in on this area for a minute. His next victim was Paul Yaw. And after shooting Paul Yaw, there was an extended period of time, and then he went to his fourth victim, because remember, Natasha's number two. So he went to his fourth victim, Salvador, and from Salvador, he then went back up to the north, and he shot and killed Jonathan Hernandez Rodriguez. Now, you're seeing some things that hopefully are piquing your interest here. He then came down and killed his next victim here, and that was Juan Cruz. And then after Juan, hopefully I'm not making everybody seasick here, he went up and killed the final victim that he knew of, Lawrence Lopez. So what I thought was interesting and what I wanted to point out is I went back and did some research. And the first thing that I found so interesting is right here. Let's see if I can point all these out a little cleaner here. Oops. So in the last 20 years, this suspect has lived right here, down in the lower right corner. He's lived right here next to victim number 4. He lived here, victim number 5. And then over 6 and 7, he lived over here at the time. I think at the time of his arrest, this is where he's living. I'm going to just kind of stop there for a second and come back and just kind of look at some questions and get your thoughts on what you're seeing there. Because the thing that I see immediately is this intense understanding of the area. He has lived, he's probably walked, hiked, jogged, whether he had a limp or not, he's been active probably in that area. And he knows the area, knows it well. So let's see. Oh, here we go, Marilyn. We were just talking about this guy on Web Sleuths. Can't believe they captured him that fast. Yeah. Now, there was a question down here. Why did he pick only Latinos? Now, we know that there was an outlier there. Natasha Latour is African-American. People have wondered why a woman, why African-American. If you look at the images, if you go back and watch my video a couple of nights ago, Natasha has a very short haircut, could, in my opinion, at 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, in low light conditions, easily have been mistaken for someone of a different race or ethnicity. someone that was male rather than female. So I think he was focusing on a certain kind of group, and uh, I think it was homelessness. Now, the interesting thing is we learn more if, in fact, the records that I've uncovered are correct. If he truly is involved in the health industry, and it will be interesting to see what kind of feeling he may have had or expressed at work about indigent care and people who are coming into the hospital that can't afford to pay for a doctor, and are a taxation on the system, which many transients would be. Although in most transient camps, rarely do they seek medical help other than going to midtown clinics or things like that. But I'll be interested in what your thoughts are on that, and hopefully you'll have some insight. And again, boy, I'm spitballing based on what I've uncovered thus far. But what are your thoughts there? I mean, to me, it makes really interesting sense that if he's tied into administration of healthcare, and these are people that would be a taxation on the income productivity of a healthcare system, it's kind of interesting what they may or may not do. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you for doing that. How many did he kill? I don't. I don't know how many he killed. I suspect that we're going to see more added to the numbers, but right now there are 6 people confirmed dead that they've tied ballistically through NIBRS. NIBRS is a weapons incident management system. In fact, I sat in a meeting today with the director of alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, and he was talking about the amount of weapons investigations that ATF is doing every single day. They are looking at thousands of cases and tying those together every single day based on ballistics. They're able to analyze the bullet. They call them lands and grooves. Those are those little creases you see on the bullet. And when the bullet comes out of the barrel, it starts spinning like this. Those lands and grooves, if you look down the inside of a gun barrel, will actually force the bullet to start spinning, which gives it the ability to go through the air and remain accurate. So they can microscopically tie, based on those lands and grooves, bullets that are recovered from different victims back to the same weapon. That's what they did in this particular case with this predator, is they did that. Now, there may have also been casings at the scene because it was a handgun that was used. And while bullets are going out the front, that projectile can be recovered and examined, but the casing, the cartridge that holds the bullet, is being expelled out the side or the back. And not every time can people pick up those pieces of brass. And so on the backside where the firing pin hits the bullet, there's so much force that it also creates a fingerprint of sorts on the casing that can be analyzed and shown against other things. So that's how they've tied this case together, and why we're seeing what we have here. Here's kind of an interesting question from Big Zebra. I heard that some killers regard themselves as cleaning up the neighborhood. Is there any truth that killers think like that? You know what? I've heard and interviewed serial killers who talk about, especially those that have selected sex trade workers or others, that they're doing a service. Robert Ben Rhodes, if you remember Robert Ben Rhodes, he's believed to have killed as many as 300 women. And as an individual that I interviewed and we tied to a couple of murders, Robert Ben Rhodes would call his eventual victims, especially if he picked them up in a truck stop, lot lizards. So there's this arrogance and disgusting regard for humanity that many of them have. And to some, it's just plain sport, which is really frightening, isn't it? To think that someone would go out and commit those kinds of crimes just for sport. Well, let's go back to the map for a moment. So as we start looking at this, I think it's really kind of interesting. Again, the locations where this suspect lived, and what I want to do is clear off some of this information and put in here a little bit of a diagram to kind of show some things that I looked at originally in this case, trying to figure out who this predator was. The first thing that I wanted to do is dispel in my own noggin whether I believed or not that this predator was riding the rails and committing crimes. And for those that were saying, hey, it's the duck walk killer from Chicago and everything else, could have been right. I personally didn't ever feel that, but the first thing I wanted to do is just bring in all of the railroad lines in the area. So this is kind of intriguing to look at, and I'm going to change this map over that you're looking at so that you're looking at it full screen here. This is clearly the railroad tracks where Natasha Latour was and where she was shot. And if you think about this now, this predator was going through a really interesting evolution. And as someone who's interviewed a lot of serial killers, as different as they like to think they are, they're very much the same. As they progress, it's a way for them to act out their fantasies. And the realities here, folks, is think about your own fantasies for a moment. And I don't think we have many serial killers on the line with us tonight. In fact, I'm going to just pop back out here and just chat with you for a second. I don't think we have any serial killers on here. But what we found, and we got to get another person to join up, because right now there's 666 people watching. Oh, thankfully we went to 668. I'm a little goofy on this satanic thing after working those crimes for a lot of years. So here's the deal. Fantasy is always cooler than our realities. And so what happens with these serial killers is that they start to fantasize about what this experience would be like. So I'm going to just kind of vicariously put my myself in the shoes of this particular predator on his first hunt. And I'd like you to kind of join with me on this and think about whether you can agree with this or whether you think I'm just completely up in the night. And for people that are new to Profiling Evil, I kind of like to look at these cases a lot from a behavioral perspective, because I spend a lot of my career looking at criminal behavior. But I also like to use this as a chance for us to learn and hopefully reduce our own risk levels. So here we go. Think about your own fantasy, whether it's that you want to be a rock star out on a stage, or you want to be the most incredible date on the planet. We all have fantasies. The problem with fantasy is it will always fall short of reality. And so now I want to take us back to that very first homicide that occurred in Seminary in Oakland. And if you watch my first video where we talked about Seminary, it's a pretty rough area. This predator, undoubtedly, in my opinion, worked through what this experience was going to be like when he killed someone for the first time. And he fantasized about it. He went to the gun range and he set up bottles and he kind of worked through all of this fantasy in his mind. But then he acted it out. And usually two things happen on the first homicide based on, and again, I'm basing it on my own experience, having interviewed a lot of serial predators, that there is this incredible rush of finally doing what you've been saying you were going to do, what you'd been dreaming about, what you'd been fantasizing about. There's this incredible rush of power and sense of dominion and control that is unmatched in their life because they finally did it. They pulled the trigger and they acted it out. At the same time, there's an incredible rush of reality and fear of, what if I get caught? Is this the moral thing to do? And while most serial killers, I think, lack empathy and in most cases lack souls, I think people, perhaps even like this guy, in that first murder thought, what have I done? Because he went through this process, but he was so ramped up emotionally that 6 days later, he commits one. But he also is feeling pretty confident because nothing's really said about that first murder. It's just another homicide of another individual in Oakland, California. And so now he picks someone else and he has that rush again. But every time he does it, something doesn't quite work out. The second one, when he commits that homicide, he uses the environment to make it more successful. He says, I'm going to use that train and the noise of the train in order to muffle the sound of the weapon. But the victim in that case does something that he didn't expect. She crouches down. She makes it harder for him to get a target. I don't know, and it's going to be really interesting to see why initially he turned that weapon. I'm going to point my fingers like it's a gun. I'm sorry because I don't like doing this very much. But he kind of takes the gangster stance when he does this and starts shooting. But when things fall apart, when the fantasy falls apart, do you remember what he did? He drops to a knee and takes a two-handed stance and continues shooting. So what we see is this disorganization that takes him back to what he's practiced and understands and knows, and he acts it out. But then this guy goes 448 days without committing another homicide that we know of. And so it makes you think of a couple of things. It makes me think either he was fitting the typical things we talk about, like he was incarcerated, or he went into a mental health institution, or he was deployed overseas, or something like that. It's going to be really interesting, and I want you to watch for these kinds of things as more information about this predator comes out in the coming weeks and through the trial phase, because we're going to figure out whether he has military experience. We're going to figure out why he limps when he walks. We're going to figure out why he picked the victims that he picked. But right now, we can start to theorize based on legitimate kinds of things that each of us experience. Now, the difference is these predators go about things through illegitimate means. So he's all of a sudden feeling all this emotion. And for one reason or another, whether it's guilt, he's trying to find God, he's going somewhere else and committing these murders, all we know is that things change for 448 days until he ramps up again in July. And then, boy, the genie is out of the bottle, and he commits those 5 homicides that we were looking at. So let's go back to this map for a minute. So I looked at that railroad yard, certainly fit Natasha, but I had some problem with some of these other victims that he would have to take a little bit of risk walking from the train yard, timing it so that he could kill someone and get back to the train. And frankly, it just didn't make sense. It was just way too much work, in my opinion. So from there, I went in and I said, let's just look at some drive times. If he had his vehicle and was driving from the location that he committed these murders, how far could he get at 3 o'clock in the morning? And I used 3 a.m. as just kind of a baseline because those murders, the majority of them happened between midnight and 6 a.m. So using Stockton traffic at 3 a.m., I did this little thing, we call it geoprocessing, where we figure out how far a person can drive in 1 minute. And then I wanted to look at it at 3 minutes. And all of a sudden at 3 minutes, I started thinking, now we're starting to see people kind of bundled in. And why would someone pick a location that is so close to where they live or where they are operating? And the reason these predators do that is because they can get back to their lair quickly. But would you drive a vehicle in the neighborhood where you live and where your lair is, and and take the risk that somebody's going to see you. So I found myself being less impressed with a vehicle being used in the course of these cases. It'll be interesting because police on this particular one said he was out driving. So does he drive to an outskirts and walk in and then run to his car? I don't know. But the other thing that I thought was interesting is to then go in and look at the bus lines through the area. And I'm going to take off the railroads. And now all of a sudden things start getting really interesting to me because it's a city, so it shouldn't be too surprising. But look how close the bus lines run to places he's lived, places he probably frequents. And then if we look at the bus stops themselves, all of a sudden we have another set of things to think about. So this thing just kind of keeps getting a little more intriguing and a little more intriguing. Well, let's stop and answer a couple of questions, and then I want to go into the press conference and talk a little further. So we get to this point where he's really ramped up. All of a sudden, he stops about 3 weeks ago. Why did he stop? Was it because of the publicity? And if you watched my show a couple of nights ago, I actually talked about this is where I worry when we in the true crime community or social media or the intense social media presence, if we're actually teaching these predators what we're learning along the way, which causes them to evolve. Because keep in mind, they don't want to get caught. They want to be successful. Now, I've had a lot of serial killers who have told me over time that, yeah, I just kind of got to the point I wanted to be caught. Baloney. They didn't want to be caught. It's a cop-out. They wanted to keep doing it because it was what fueled their fire. But once they're caught, it's a lot easier to say, I wanted to. You weren't that good. I wanted to be caught. And that gives them this ability to keep thinking they're the best serial killer on the planet or whatever else. I don't know. It was an interesting experience to interview serial predators, to sit with a Richard Ramirez and eat prison lasagna and talk about homicides and watch as they relive the experience and try not to show emotion. Think about when you tell a story about some conquest you've had and you start to smile because you're so excited about what you did. I caught this huge fish, or I was hiking and I made it to the top of this mountain and there was this incredible vista. Your whole demeanor changes. And the same thing happens with these serial predators as they talk through their events, and they try to then minimize it in many cases. But that's the part of profiling where you really get to see who they are and what they're made of. The Erie Ferry, thank you so much for that kind gift. I really appreciate it. Let's see. I agree with this. Hats off to Stockton PD. Yeah, they did a great job. In fact, I want to say to a Profiling Evil viewer, I actually had a professor from Mexico who is a professor in gait analysis reach out to me. We chatted back and forth, and she analyzed the video of the gait of this predator and why he would lean the way he would lean and what he was doing. And I sent that off to Chief McFadden a couple of days ago, and don't know, didn't get a response back, but I told this doctor that we couldn't get on the air and share it because I thought it was the kind of thing that only the police needed to know, and she agreed. Miss Jeanne, any commonality amongst the victims? First and foremost, thank you for that kind gift. That's really nice. Yeah, I think there's a lot of commonality among them. One is we're seeing that ethnicity. They were Latino. I think that we're seeing the financial condition of many of them. Most if not every one of them, were either living homeless, or were living in a car, would be homeless. These were the downtrodden among us, and he was selecting those individuals. Um, so we're starting to see some things that are really interesting. There was an age range that was really interesting, except for the outlier of the 21-year-old. So yeah, I think we're going to see some victim selection, preferential victim characteristics that are going to become more and more clear as we learn more and more about this predator. So great question. Thank you so much. Murder Candy Podcast. Thank you. Well, I appreciate the fact that you enjoy the lives. I don't do them very often because I don't know. I don't like to hear myself drone on and on. So nor do many of you, because I do get notes from you. So and Genlo, thank you. I like the way you explain the mentality of the serial killer. I can't imagine hearing about all those details. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. But the thing that I used to, when I would teach profiling to law enforcement, and I've had the opportunity to teach all around the world, when I would teach the principles of profiling, I always went back to just normal. I don't believe in the voodoo of television profiling. Profiling is just a systematic way of looking at things. It's taking traditional forms of evidence and kind of setting them aside on a shelf for a short time while you re-examine the case from a behavioral perspective. And when we do that, we start to see how evidence can come together and corroborate each other. And so in reality, it's kind of like the comment I made earlier. I don't think there are any serial killers on here, but we all have legitimate kinds of needs. We have a need to belong, to be loved, to be successful, to right wrongs. The difference between predators like this and you and me is that we are willing to go through the ups and downs of relationship building. We don't just take something because we need it. And um, you think about the different mentalities that cause criminals to react. There are those like the Tasmanian devil that just think, I want this, I'm going to take it, I deserve it, by golly, and they jump in. Then there's the other predator who says, I want it, but I'm going to kind of work out this thing so that it falls in my favor. And then there's the rest of us that say, it didn't work out the way I hoped and fantasized about. I got to work harder in relationships or I'm going to be a lonely sack the rest of my life. And we just kind of figure out how to get through life together. Well, let's see. Michelle Mybell, thank you so much. This is so kind of you. Thank you for the respect and knowledge you present on cases. It's rare on YouTube. Please pray for the 3 police officers that were ambushed in Connecticut. 1 survived. We're all devastated. You know, if you caught my Twitter this morning, as we were kicking off the meeting right before the assistant director of the FBI presented some things in our meeting, we had a moment of silence. 12 police officers have been shot in during this week. 12 police officers, 5 have died in the line of duty. I sat with former Chief Craig McCurdy from Las Vegas Metro yesterday in a meeting, and I asked him how he was doing, and he said, a kid I knew from the police department was killed today. I mean, this is the reality of what law enforcement is facing. As I listened to the ATF director today talking about the number of weapons that are being seized, and we're not keeping up, and officers are facing guns on a regular basis. It is just crazy. Glam Dolly, let's see what you have to say here. He stopped 3 weeks ago because he was feeling the heat with the publicity. I can't disagree with that. Cops say a tip plus old-fashioned police work caught him. Cameras had a lot to do with it. And yes, thank goodness for cameras. And if you watch my video a couple of days ago, I actually, in fact, well, heck, let's look at that here. Just see it real quickly if I can pop this up. That is a really important part of all of this, is the camera infrastructure. And what I did on here is I put every camera in the state of California on this map so that I could access those. So let me see if this happened to pop up. Oh, it didn't pop up. Let me see if I can share the camera feed. So that link that I clicked on was actually this information, which shows minute by minute every camera at that location. So it's really cool because the technology is available. Of course, I do a lot with GIS, so I'm able to kind of figure out how to pull that stuff in and use it on a map. And I don't know if you caught that in my little map that I had there, but I actually called it the Stockton serial killer map. So if you go back and watch this later, you can see that. Maybe I'll publish it out so y'all can explore it or something. Who knows? Anyway, Don looks like a new member. Thank you for jumping in, and appreciate everybody who's weighing in and talking back and forth to each other. Let's see. I would love to hear what is in the background to see what sparked him to commit these murders. So, yeah, let's kind of focus on that again. Just I'll tell you a couple of things. Some will be cryptic, others will be maybe just outright. But again, this guy, if my research is accurate, and I believe it is, same date of birth, same name. He works as a vice president in administration in a healthcare system, has lots of relationships and family in the area. He's been in Stockton for a lot of years. He's had, let's see here. He's had the same email address since 2013. So that's always something that shows some interesting consistency. Again, he had 5-6 residents, different apartments in the Stockton area in the last 20 years or so that I pulled up. He's been a pretty clean citizen. He's had a failure to stop at a port of entry, so he got dinged for not stopping at a port of entry, and he got a citation for speeding, and but that's the only crimes that are shown on his history that I'm able to find. He's got a social media account on Facebook that's been taken down by police. Interestingly, he's got some business affiliates that he's tied to, and there's some corporate filings with his information in them that are still active today. So it'll be interesting if that kind of comes out. And that's about it. So it's like you, I'm going to be really excited to find out what more we can learn. So Bug Love, thank you so much. 95 Octon Stockton. Brownlee was a guy named Dale Brownlee was shot and killed on a street corner. Any relation, brother, maybe his first kill. Isn't that interesting? Don't know. I don't see. Let me just look at his kind of family tree here to see if a Brownlee pops up that matches that name. Not seeing anything that jumps right out, but anyway. So Jen Lowe, thanks. I'll try to do a live more often. It's really nice when I'm not at home. I don't have grandkids and things that I really love doing in the way, and I don't go out and drink at night. So I sit in my hotel room and think, what am I going to do tonight? And I can only watch so many episodes of Seinfeld on my iPad. So That's really nice of you. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Let's see. Oh, this is nice. Trucking Dog Girl. Could his murders have anything to do with wanting attention? Absolutely. Doesn't want to be arrested, I might say, but loves the attention. Can you imagine what a psychological and sick thrill this is for these predators to go out in their neighborhood and say, "Gosh, I heard there was another murder last night. What do you think, Mrs. Jones?" And and to be able to hear this fear that they're creating, and this power and control in their mind that they have. These predators are sick souls. I told this story the other night on Web Sleuths, and I hope those of you, if you're from Web Sleuths, you don't like fall asleep. But I'm going to tell you, because it was a serial killer that confessed to killing 8 elderly women to me, and he was in prison. We were trying to tie him to some other murders, and as we were talking, his preferential victim was elderly women, and he really not only would physically abuse them and then murder them, but then he would often afterward get them in the tub, and he would just do all kinds of sick and demented things. And then he would dress them up in their nightgowns and put them in their bed and cover them up. And a day or two later, the kids would come by to check on grandma because they hadn't heard from her. And they'd say, "Oh, thankfully she died in her sleep," not having any idea that this predator had terrorized him and brutalized him. And I remember interviewing him in a prison in Helena, Montana. And we were talking, and I had Greg Cooper with me. We were doing a study for the Bureau of Justice on predators who select elderly women as their victims. And believe it or not, we had a threshold. They had to have at least 3 victims that they murdered so that we could call them a serial killer and fit within a certain category to fit this Bureau of Justice study. And I think we interviewed 13 of them across the United States that were very peculiar in that way. But again, here I'm rambling. I'm so sorry. So here it is. We're talking, and he leans forward to me and he says, "You're having a hard time understanding this, aren't you?" I said, "Well, why don't you put it in layman's terms, what it is that causes you to want to kill people?" And he said, "Okay." And he kind of drifted his eyes up and he said, "Do you ever watch those National Geographic shows out in Africa where the lions are laying out there and they're laying in the sun, and this lioness is laying on her back and she's licking her paws and she's rolling on her back and softly pawing a cub next to her, and they just look so serene?" He said, then all of a sudden, something inside of him starts to churn. Some people would call it hunger. To a serial killer, it's a different hunger. But he said, all of a sudden, the lion gets up and starts thinking, "I'm going to go out and hunt for a victim." And as the lion goes out and starts to hunt for a victim, her ears get a little tighter. Her skin and her muscles tighten up. Her focus and her eyesight gets so much more refined. And when it identifies a victim, an antelope in the brush, it slowly starts to move in. And if you watch him, you can actually see him quivering because of the excitement that they're feeling about this prey that they're going to jump on and consume. He said, "That's exactly how I feel as a serial killer." He said, "Sometimes I wake up in the morning and all I can think about is finding an old lady." He said, then if you watch that lion, once they take that game down and kill it, it is the most satisfying moment for them. For them, they consume it. And then what does the lioness do? She walks back to the tall grass, lays down in the grass, and starts licking the blood off of her paws and enjoying the nice African sun until the urge comes again. So, bedtime stories from Mike. Let me see what you think about that. And while I'm doing that, Kathy, thank you so much. When profiling a killer is the question of a former military for knowledge of weapons or something more. Yeah, well, you know what? It's going to be interesting to see why he went from pointing this way, looking like a gangster, to dropping down to a stance. It's going to be interesting to see if he's had concealed weapons permit training or anything like that. This will be interesting to see unfold. So, so I'm sorry. Some of you are saying this is horrific. I know it. I shouldn't share some of those stories. This is why I think it's so important, folks, that, and I don't know if you noticed, some of you comment on the fact that I keep kind of a light sense of humor when talking about really dark things. I have a faith tradition that enables me to separate from the ugliness created by evil. And I think that when you are filling your bucket with nothing but ugliness, you start becoming ugly. And we see some of those people, I call them trolls, that just want to be ugly and mean. But people that have figured out how to keep putting good stuff in their bucket find a way to look at these things. And frankly, there is nothing more gratifying in life to me than knowing that I was the voice for the voiceless at times. That a little boy named Ian Wing, who was murdered, that years after his murder, I was able to get a confession and put that person in prison for killing that little boy. It is an amazing blessing that these police officers have, and yet it comes with a pretty ugly price. Anyway, enough. I'll get off my my religious soapbox there and just say I hope you have something that fills all the good. Don't just keep watching true crime. Make sure you're looking at some butterflies and bunnies once in a while and enjoying things that are I don't know, a little more uplifting. So let's go in. Let's watch the press conference together. It's going to go on for about 20 minutes. I may stop it. I may just let it go, and we'll chat after. But I'll watch your comments in here, and if something really jumps out, I might interrupt. So here we go.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Stockton City Manager Harry Black. This afternoon, you will also be hearing from Stockton Police Chief Stanley McFadden and Stockton Mayor Kevin Lincoln. As we will continue to do throughout this ordeal, we wanted to provide a situational update to the public this afternoon. First, I would like to extend condolences to the victims and their families. Please know that we are doing everything that we can to keep the city safe and to apprehend what looks like to be a single person who has committed these crimes, although we continue to chase down evidence to definitively confirm this fact. Daily, Stockton Police Department monitors numerous data points related to crime throughout the city. As such, we know what the city's historical patterns are when it comes to crime, not unlike how we know about our own personal health. As we know ourselves, we know our city as it relates to crime. Through its daily data analysis protocol, Stockton PD has discovered an irregularity in the standard pattern of crime this year. This series of homicides is abnormal for Stockton, and as such, Stockton PD has stood up a task force, including its own resources and resources of our external partners. Chief McFadden will talk more about this shortly. In addition, we are offering an unprecedented $95,000, now $115,000 reward for information that directly leads to the capture of this person. At this time, you will hear from Chief McFadden, and then he will be followed by Mayor Kevin Lincoln, after which we will entertain a couple of questions. Chief.
Thank you. As I said before, we would reconnect with all of you when we have some more case developments, and that's why we're here today. I first want to address the comments regarding Stockton having a serial killer. You know, that's what's been messaged. That's the big question that we keep being asked. By definition, these shootings are a series of killings, and so we do believe we could have potential serial killer. That's how we're going to treat it as such. At this time, we don't know if it's a person or persons. As I said before, we have absolutely no evidence that connects a person or persons to any of these incidences. But we are still receiving tips, and we still will continue to review those tips, and hopefully more information will come forward. We have some video footage that we're going to show you here today. It's going to be a very short video. And when you all see the video, I want you to pay close attention to the uneven stride that this person has. Again, this person is a person of interest. Again, we have no evidence that connects this person as.
Well, folks, I'm so sorry. I owe you all an apology. This is an old press conference, and the back office sent me this, and I thought we were set and ready to roll. So I'm going to just look real quickly online and see if I can find today's press conference, because it looked exactly the same starting off. And that's the one that we need to see. So just give me a moment here, and I apologize once again. I think what I'm going to do is put this news broadcast up that I think covers this.
And we begin with that breaking news tonight.
And again, folks, I apologize. I don't know what I've done here, but hang on a second here. All right, let's try this.
With that breaking news tonight coming out of Stockton, police say they have made a series of connected killings. Several Stockton leaders announced the arrest in a press conference today. Police Chief Stanley McFadden says this man on your screen, officer, stopped 43-year-old Wesley Brownlee early this morning.
Our surveillance team followed this person while he was driving. We watched his patterns and determined early this morning he was on a mission to kill. He was out hunting.
It's a massive update tonight. With more details on this arrest, we go to KCRA 3's Michelle Bandura, who is live in Stockton. Michelle, I know you were there in person when this news was announced today. What have we learned so far?
Well, Brittany, police believe that they stopped this accused killer on his way to find his eighth victim. Police also say that it was community tips to Crime Stoppers and good old-fashioned police work that led them to the accused killer.
The suspect's reign of terror in our community has come to an end.
The Stockton Chief of Police and city leaders announced the arrest of this man, 43-year-old Wesley Brownlee, who lives in Stockton. They believe he is the one responsible for killing 5 people in Stockton, one in Oakland, and injuring another.
Surveillance team followed this person while he was driving. We watched his patterns and determined early this morning he was on a mission to kill. He was out hunting.
Police say officers followed Brownlee from his home around 2 this morning and stopped him in his car at the intersection of Winslow Way and Village Green Drive, marked here with the yellow box. It was near an apartment complex they believe he was looking for victims. They also recovered this handgun in his car and are running tests to see if it was used in all 7 shootings. The chief says they've been
The last
speaking
2
with the
days, I
victims'
had met
families
with our victims,
throughout the
their
investigation
families.
and gave them the news.
I can't go into our conversations, but our talks were very emotional. They want us to bring this person to justice.
And police say just because they made an arrest does not mean the investigation is over. They say they still have a lot of work to do, and they still want people in the community, like they have been all along, to give them any tips if they still have any information that could help them. Again, Crime Stoppers, a tip to Crime Stoppers, help detectives track down the suspect. Now, Wesley Brownlee is expected to be in court on Tuesday. That's when we'll find out all of the charges filed against him. Reporting live in Stockton, Michelle Bandur, KCRA 3 News.
Michelle, thank you. And we know there have been questions throughout this investigation about who was responsible for these killings. So at this point, are police looking for any other suspects?
No, police tell us right now that this is the only suspect at this time that they believe is connected to all of the killings. Brittany.
All right, Michelle, thank you so much.
All right. Well, I apologize. I didn't have the whole press conference, but frankly, I rescued you too. When you watch it, especially when the DA gets up, there's a lot of backslapping and everybody's really, and rightly so. I mean, they did a great job, but I was there to hear the police chief talk and explain who this suspect is and where they found him and the circumstances. And you'll be able to get that and do that. And sorry about the echo. It took me a minute to figure out why that was creating that. So there you go, folks. Let's see if you got some questions, and we'll answer them. If not, let's not belabor things. We'll call it a night. So let's read for a few minutes. And to all of you who super chatted and did all that, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Now, there's a lot of folks on here that maybe we've never seen before. Please consider subscribing. We try to do things a little differently on Profiling Evil, and hopefully tonight you've enjoyed it. And sorry for the spooky bedtime stories. I'll try to not get too into the cop story mode. So let's see. Yeah, this is interesting. They said that was done by a call-in tip. So somebody just had enough and said something was bugging them, and so we'll see. Oh, it looks like Scientific Skeptic. Now, you've created a lot of news lately, and thanks for taking good care of my friend over at Web Sleuths and for the way you look at things. So thanks a lot. Let's see. Jeannie Nash, thank you so much. Canadian money. I think you're still a little bit higher than us, so that's really kind of you. And I don't know where you're from, Jeannie, but I think you know I was just up in Saskatoon, and I was in Toronto a few weeks ago, meeting with the police department there on something. And anyway, it's so nice of you to do all that. Let's see. Thank you, Cherry. I hope I don't get a little overboard on some of these things. You know me, I'm like way too reserved, everybody says, but let's see. Thanks again for jumping in, and I don't know if you caught the live a couple of nights ago. I got chewed out by a few people because Duty Ron dropped in, and then Trisha jumped in from Web Sleuths, and I can't remember if Annie dropped in. And anyway, we just had some fun and chatted, and yesterday I in between meetings, I jumped in on John Lorden's show for a minute and said hello. And there are just some really impressive people that are doing YouTube creation out there that I really like. Let's see. If law enforcement believes Brownlee is the only suspect, I'm sure that they're in possession of evidence. Yeah, boy, isn't this going to be interesting if they run the ballistics and the weapon he had isn't the weapon that ties everybody together. They clearly have got to have a whole lot of other information. But you know what? It was just not happen chance that they arrest a guy wearing a hoodie and a black face mask and packing a gun and driving in that same area either. That was not just happen chance. So let's see here. Let's see. How was it determined that 3 equals a serial killer? You know, there's a lot of discussion around that. I don't know if you, Jen Lowe, saw the interview when I had Mark Safrick on, a former profiler that I've worked with for years. We were talking about spree shootings versus mass shootings versus serial killers. The real difference in a serial killer is that there is an event and then a cool down period and then an event. And in my mind, I've always used 3 as the number where I start saying they're a serial killer. I guess at 2, you could do it. I did a study for the Department of Justice on budding serial killers that focused on the people who were going through the fantasy process, but they only killed one person by the time they were arrested and put in prison for the rest of their life. And yet the mindset was there, the fantasy process, the preparation, and everything else. So it's I think it's 3 is a good number. But anyway, yeah, Glam Dolly, I agree. Support the true crime good guys, not the bad ones. I agree. And there are a couple of knuckleheads that do some weird things. And but anyway, I think you all think I'm a knucklehead at times and do some weird things too. So I'm not going to judge that. Let's see. Let me see. So many people in the Stockton community, I'm assuming, were living in fear. Tips come in quickly after the video. You know, I think the thing that Delana is really important to me is that we don't victim blame, but we absolutely put responsibility on victims for the choices. Every one of these victims were living in high-risk situations. Doesn't mean they deserve to be murdered. When someone decides to leave the mall at 10 o'clock at night and go out to their car in a dark parking lot, and there's a group of thugs hanging around the car, it's increasing risk versus calling security or a police officer to meet them there and get them into the vehicle. I mean, again, doesn't make the victimization right, but it absolutely puts responsibility. If you haven't seen my videos on the victim risk continuum, folks, please take a little time and go back and visit them. If in the Profiling Evil Academy, if you just look for the victim risk continuum, it's a short video where we get right to the nuts and bolts about victimization. So let's see. I wonder if they could put all serial killers in one huge cage and the one survives. Okay, so I'm going to tell you another story that I haven't told anyone before. There was a serial killer named Brandon Wilson, and another YouTube creator and I had talked about Brandon on many occasions. That YouTube creator did an excellent job on the investigation. But later, I was meeting with Brandon in San Quentin prison after he was convicted and sitting in prison, and he was pumping up his chest and talking about what a great serial killer he was. And I had just finished having lunch with Richard Ramirez, and I said, well, Brandon, if you're this tough of a serial killer, why aren't you tuning up everybody on death row? And he was a scrawny little kid. And I said, if you'd like, I can talk to the warden and we can work it out and put you over in general population where you could really tune some people up. And of course, he backed right off. These guys are just a lot of yap most of the time. but they're a terrifying yap at when they're out. So I don't know. Anyway, let's see. Well, you're all wonderful. Thank you so much. That's really nice. Strawberry wine. Love you. Love your rambling stories. Kendra, love the story. Here's Dogs with Jobs. Lives are always excellent. Thank you so much. I just don't do them a whole lot, and hope that when I do, it's something worthwhile. And I hope tonight was, even though I blew the press conference, Glam Dolly show was great. Thanks. And gosh, you're all saying nice, but here we go. This guy was hunting for the 4th victim. He's a serial. Yes, he would never stop. Actually, he was out hunting for the 8th victim. If I'm thinking you're talking about the same case we're talking about tonight, Corrine. But yeah, you're right on. Jimmy May, you're right. A little bit disturbing. Let's see. Why is a person of color not subject to the race card once the suspect has been identified? You know what? I'm not a real pro at all this. I've never been black or Asian or anything else other than what I am. But I know that there are prejudiced people. I know that there are people who are identified and victimized because of color. I know in this case that the alleged killer is now known as an African American, that his victims were Latino and one African American. I know that the police chief in Stockton is African American. But again, I will not in any way try to speak for people of color who have had to face things that I never have, folks. All I know is when I look at statistics, they are statistics that are hard to argue against, including those statistics that don't support some of the theories out there about people being unrightly victimized. So I think it goes both ways. But again, I've never had to face that. So where were they following him? What did they do when they made him stop? They actually, in the press conference, say where the address was, and I forgot to put it on the map where they made the arrest, because that's going to be really interesting when that pops up. So, yeah, we're going to have to watch for that. Jen Lowe, thank you so much, folks. Please hit that like and subscribe button, and I hope you're all subscribing. We want to grow. I was on with Duty Ron last night for a few minutes, and I was talking to Ed, and I teased Ron that I'm right behind him, and I'm going to try to pass him up on subscriptions someday. But that guy's just knocking it out of the park and doing such a great job. And I hope, folks, that you are subscribing to all the good ones, because there are some amazing people out there doing some honorable things. And while we don't always agree, I'll call up Ron and I'll say, did you fall off your trike on this one? And he'll do the same thing to me. And yet I absolutely respect him as an investigator and appreciate it. Becky Taylor, let's see what you got to say here. I've learned that the occupation serial killers like best is truck drivers, police officers, military force. Wow, I didn't know that. It would be cool to publish that, Becky, if you actually did something that was truly a study, because I didn't know that. That's interesting. Patricia, serial killers that are caught after the first kill is still a serial killer. Interesting angle. Let's see. America True Crime. Being homeless for people isn't always a choice given rising rents, etc. Hey, amen, American True Crime. Thanks. I hope that there was nothing that suggested I was thinking otherwise along those. Again, I've always been a white guy that had an education and had a family that there was no democracy in, that we were required to work and other kinds of things. And some people have had different kinds of experiences. And gosh, such a tough one. I don't want to get into all of that, though. Let's see. Yeah. if you go to the Mapping Evil website, you can find my prison lasagna recipe. I've eaten so much prison lasagna with predators that finally Mapping Evil decided just to publish the prison lasagna recipe. So you can go on your next party, you can do a true crime party and have prison lasagna, and it's as bad as it sounds. Those poor folks in there aren't getting the best of food, but some people would say they don't deserve the best of food. So, all right, let's see. I'm going to take Sarah's counsel here. I hope you return to excellent health very soon. Yes, that I want to by tomorrow because I have to do a lot of things in the morning. Let those voices yammer away and focus on the appreciative viewers. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Sonara, I enjoy the bedtime stories. When I first left law enforcement, I wrote a book called Predators, Who They Are and How to Stop Them with Greg Cooper. And I gave it to my boss when I went to work in the private industry. And he called me and he said, I had to put the book down because I can't watch or I can't read it anymore because I can't sleep at night. So yeah, sometimes I forget that it's a different deal. Lunch with Richard, no knives or forks. Oh, you know, what you do in those circumstances, if you're really nervous, is you just chain their legs to the floor and then you sit on a table at the other end and you make it where they're just a little bit out of reach. But yeah, I was in a prison in upstate New York interviewing a serial killer, and I, without thinking, had laid my pen on the table, and he kept staring at that pen. And I thought, this guy's going to grab my pen and jab me in the forehead or something. So I picked up the pen and later saw another investigator do the same thing and called him on that. But can we do another return to the classroom to discuss the change in venues? Okay. Yeah, we could talk about that. Maybe what I could do is get Scott Reich to come on or something, and we'll chat through that. Get an attorney to cover some of that legal side of things, and then I'll argue my position, and we'll do that. Because Scott, I hope you're subscribing to Scott. He's just such a great guy, and I love the stuff that he does. Let's see. Prison lasagna with the Night Stalker would put me off pasta for life. My very dear friend who taught me how to write, actually encouraged me to write the first book, is a man named Phil Carlo. And Phil Carlo is the author of the book, The Night Stalker, the one that was the New York Times bestseller. And Phil actually wrote the foreword in one of my books. And Phil is the one who actually introduced me to Richard Ramirez. So if you look at the imagery of Richard Ramirez when he got married, his best man was the author who was writing the book about him on the Night Stalker. And Ramirez didn't have any real friends, so he asked the author, my buddy Phil, to be his best man at his wedding in prison at San Quentin. So another crazy story. I don't know. Can you believe any of this stuff? Probably you probably should check it all, because who knows? I might be absolutely a psychopath and just lying to you, but hopefully everything's documented somewhere. Here's a great one, though. Tamara says, the Hillside Strangler took me out for ice cream with his 12-year-old son. Holy cow. And folks, if you haven't watched my interview with Michelle Morris, a Profiling Evil family member, make sure you check it out. It's called A Serial Killer Used to Read Bedtime Stories to Me. And Michelle, whose father was a Texas Ranger, he brought a serial killer home one night that he'd pulled out of jail, and the serial killer was out showing him where he'd buried some dead bodies. And it got late at night, so he thought, I better feed him before I take him back, because he is not going to be able to get food at the commissary when we get back to the prison. So he brought him home, had his wife cook some dinner. He told his wife, just bring the food out on the front porch. when we get there, I'll let him eat, and then I'll get him back to jail. And his wife said, no man is going to come to my house and eat on the front porch. He'll sit at the table like anyone else. And this little tiny girl, Michelle at the time, walked in with a book and said, will you read to me? And climbed on this serial killer's lap, and he read her bedtime stories. So go back and watch that video of my interview with her. So A. Williams says, can you give a brief synopsis? The Stockton serial killer has apparently been arrested and is now in custody. The police made the arrest at 2 a.m. this morning. The suspect is a man named Wesley Brownlee, a 43-year-old African-American who at the time he was arrested was driving around, in police words, hunting for a victim. He was dressed in black, had a mask around his neck, had a weapon with him, and they are confident that they have placed the Stockton serial killer into custody. So hope that's a good overview. Some of you are probably thinking, why didn't you just say that at the first and we could have gone on and done something else? Yeah. Hey, kudos to Gray. Gray and I have been shooting a couple of emails back and forth today. He actually sent me some new stuff that he was working on, but Gray did a great job on that video from Kylie Rodney. And folks, I hope you saw my video last night on Kylie Rodney. Some people still get kind of angry at me, but I'm just really trying to force us to look at facts. And people keep saying it's a cover up because she didn't have enough water in her lungs, and they're claiming the dry drowning scenario. I just put a little thing out on Twitter today where I just quoted a medical doctor who talked about the spasms that occur when someone is drowning, and it actually forces the esophagus to close and forces the openings into the lungs to close. It doesn't mean that they still didn't drown or die from drowning. It's the lack of oxygen to the brain that causes the death. And I know we want to make a lot of conspiracy theories get really pounding and going big, but anyway, you might look at that. Diana Jane, I read Predators and I had to put it down for a month in the child offender part. It made me aware of risk reduction. Well, the book Predators, when we wrote it, we actually wrote it for people just like you, Diana. It was intended to be a tool that you could read about a predator, the way in which they went through the victim selection process, and the kinds of things that we as human beings can do to minimize our level of risk. And so hopefully it accomplished that when you read that. And we actually just updated that book about 3 months ago with 3 new chapters. So if you go on Amazon, it's a book that was the publisher on that book was Prometheus Press, but it's Predators, who they are and how we stop them. And I don't know, I think it's kind of pricey. That's why I started figuring out different publishers on some things, but got to support them because they were kind enough to do the book. So well, let's see here. We're gonna grab a couple more because you've all been kind enough to just stay on and labor with me here. Let's see. Bridie Bell, I remember you sitting in the car and a guy with a rifle came walking up to you while Chris McDonough was talking on the camera. We were talking. I was up in the mountains actually in a 4-wheel drive Razor, a Polaris Razor, folks. And we were, that was when we were preparing to do this big search for Andy Mormon on Susan Morphew. And yeah, this wacky guy walked up with his hunting rifle behind me, and he thought we were friends, I guess. And we chatted for a while on live YouTube. It was kind of crazy. Yep, I agree with you, Ernest. Truth is stranger than fiction. This is interesting. I don't know if this is true or not, Scarlett. The dude's brother was murdered. Um, please email me at profilingevil@gmail.com if you actually have something that proves that. I don't know if somebody put the info in there. Let's see. So I'm not sure what you've done there. Folks are kind of weighing in on that. I would like to know if that's true or not. Enjoy watching Profiling Evil. Oh, well, I've been here in Dallas since Wednesday, and I will be here until next Wednesday. This is a long series of meetings that started a few days ago. Let's see. Really hope you enjoy. Oh, I enjoyed this live. Thank you. I enjoyed it as well. And you all are just so darn kind. I hope Chris Ritchie just said he just or she just ordered another book. Chris, I'm so sorry. Well, good. I hope that you find some value in that one. And folks, thank you so much. You are an amazing group of people. You are always so supportive. And I hope that this has given you some insight into the mindset of a serial killer. And as we look at this thing unfold, that you'll look at it a little more with an eye of critique as you see this information unfold. And so let's get together again real soon. And from Dallas and this hotel room, somebody said, by the way, that this was a disgusting picture in the background. I don't know what's disgusting about it, so I apologize if it's offending somebody. But I'll tell you what, the barbecue in Dallas is hard to beat, and maybe I better go get some. So everybody have a great evening, and thanks so much for your support of Profiling Evil.